doing this for a long time now. We're going to teach people about the world they lost.
It's one thing to record talks when you're kind of in a good place, when you're in a place that's kind of comfortable and things are the way they are, and we kind of have homeostasis. And I look back to the end of last year. I started recording in September of 2020, and so I had this whole schedule planned out for the podcast. And I guess life isn't perfect right now for us, and there's nothing wrong with that. And maybe it's a good opportunity for me to share moments like this with people. You know, like we could celebrate in the good times, and we could acknowledge the hard times. We can celebrate, you know, the comfortable times, and we can celebrate the uncomfortable times. And I look back at myself, and the person I became was someone that thrived on hard times. Not to say that I welcome hard times, but there's an element of me, a part of me that comes out when there's a lot of pressure. And that might just be me, but the way I understand things now, especially raising my family and kind of taking ownership of my role in life, is that life is not going to be perfect. And there's going to come a time where things are hard, circumstances are hard. And rather than label, you know, this is a bad situation, I think that it's just a situation that needs to be dealt with, that needs to be experienced, and it needs to be worked out. And ultimately, I need to learn something from it. So I try not to be quick to label things bad or good. And my take on that is that shit just happens to everyone. And no one is immune to that. So what I do understand is that when a situation arises, our emotions play a big role, and we are quick to label it good and bad. But remember, your emotions change. Our emotions flip back and forth from moment to moment. Therefore, I don't think it's something that we could rely on and we can depend on. So when things do get hard, let them be hard. Let them be challenging. Separate yourself from the emotion, and I think that would kind of bring you closer to what needs to be done. I think we're in this life to sacrifice. And I know that sounds very dark. Again, the meaning of words, right? And, you know, the word sacrifice, the word suffering in the dictionary doesn't sound super pleasant, but I think that it carries a certain type of energy where saying that, you know, it's time to suffer or it's time to sacrifice one's self, that sounds like a very dark thing. But if you look at the big picture and you look at the energy of that word sacrifice, I believe it carries very positive energy. And that's why I kind of stray away from labeling things as good and bad. There are just things. There are just situations. People have different meanings for words. And for me, especially, I'm a sucker for etymology and where words come from and from different languages and different writing. So there's something I'd been wanting to talk about, and it's why the question of why bad things happen to good people. You know, needless to say, there's a lot of things going on in not just my life, but in everybody's life. I think that life is unfolding differently, especially in this past year. And if we don't take the time to speak about it or vent about it, those are the types of things that fester, and they cause a lot of pain and it causes a lot of sickness. I understand that stress is one of the number one causes of disease. Whatever type of disease, even if it's a physical type of disease, I think stress is number one, because us as human beings, we have a stress response in the body, and when the body senses a type of stress, it reacts a certain way, and that is pretty dangerous, if you ask me, in regards to health, because if we have a stress response, we usually call it the fight or flight response. And at work, I usually say it's the fight, flight, or freeze response. And we all respond to that differently when a stress comes into our lives. So simply put, there's a lot of things going on in not just my life, in everybody's life. And a question that came up for some reason this past week was, why do bad things happen to good people? Or, you hear, the worst things happen to the best people. I think what I was getting at was we label a lot of things. We put a lot of emotions and thoughts into words and the meaning of words in our lives. So one thing in particular that I learned in the past few years was that good, the word good, was something that I misunderstood growing up. I would make judgments. And I think that's exactly what the word good means, good or bad. Thinking about it, I was given the word good as a meaning of whatever it is, pleasant, peaceful, goodness, good-natured, is that word in particular is weighted down by a lot of emotional feelings and judgments. I think good in the last few years for me was kind of a word that I try to change the definition of. So to be labeled a good person is something that I felt like, and you could completely disagree with this, but I think labeling something being good is your personal judgment on it. That doesn't mean that there's no goodness in people. That means that I think that situation or that person is quote unquote good. And it's good based on my judgment. It's good based on my understanding of life. And I want to say that my judgments on that person, on that thing, on the situation is mine alone, right? I think people are people. And to be labeled a good person is an ego thing for me. I realize that I operate out of ego a lot. I've been working on that, and I've been trying to discover ways that I could steer away from that, or at least use ego as a tool rather than my ego ruling me. And I realize that a lot of things that I do does come from a place of ego at some point. And, that there's nothing wrong with that. It becomes a problem when you start operating only through ego. It's one of those double-edged swords that we want to be aware of and be careful with. And I'm still working on that. We're all still working on that. And no one is better than anybody at that. I think you know yourself more than anyone. It's keeping that ego in check and using it only to serve not you, but to help you work and to serve the people that you are serving. I look back at myself in the past few years as a nurse, and it is one of those things where nurses are held in high regard, and people praise and admire nurses for the work that they do. But at the end of the day, me feeling good about being a nurse doesn't necessarily mean that I'm spreading goodness. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm doing good work. I think when I put a label on myself like, oh, I'm a good person, or that person's a good person, the way I look at it now is that I'm kind of limiting myself. I'm kind of limiting that person by labeling them good. For me, it sounds like I'm giving them this label now after this action, and they're good now. And moments before this, they weren't good. And it made me think a lot because goodness is in our nature as humans. And when we say bad things happen to good people, I think we're putting a lot more We're putting a lot more emotions on top of it. There's goodness in all. And we label situations and decisions that someone has made as good or bad. But in reality, in that person's perspective, they're actually doing the best that they can. So I can't really label that, this person or this situation is good or that was a good decision. What is it measured against? What metrics are we using to label and to judge something as good? Even in nursing, where we have lab values are huge, and it's essential to understand, especially when you're taking care of somebody. And there's what we call therapeutic ranges, normal ranges. We would label someone with good health, but again, that's based on a metric system. What if someone's baseline blood pressure is on the low side? We're talking like 90/60. Based on the textbook, that's not the best health. But let's say their blood pressure dropped. They were given meds, or they're given fluids, whatever it is that would help that person in their particular case, and we get it up to 89/50, right? That's low based on the textbook, but that's actually good for that person. So in essence, good and bad it's relative to that individual. I can be quote unquote a bad person my whole life and do something good, and would that cancel out everything, or would that even make sense? And would I be labeled a good person at that point? What I'm getting at is I'm realizing that we put these labels, and it doesn't help us. It doesn't serve us. And when we think about, I want to be a good person, or I'm just a bad person, we're placing a judgment that's not necessary. I think life just happens, and suffering is inevitable for all of us. Shit happens to everyone. It's labeling it that makes it worse. So when, and I'm saying shit happens as like, it's not necessarily a negative thing. Shit happens. Everything happens to everyone. When we put a label like this is a good situation, this is a bad situation, that's when we start bringing the human aspect. And I think that's what makes it harder for us to get through. If you're going through a stormy situation in life and we start thinking like, oh shit, this is a bad situation. See how much emotion can creep up after that. Where acknowledging that it's a bad situation, a quote, bad situation, it doesn't help the situation. It's us putting our emotion on top of it. What I'm trying to learn and what I'm trying to kind of understand more now is that level of stoicism that there's no good, there's no bad, there just is. It is what it is. And we have to, from that point, take action. When I would label something a bad situation, one of the questions that my intellect actually starts asking is, why does this have to happen? Almost like a challenge to circumstances. And that doesn't help the situation. This situation is what it is. Therefore, what do I need to do to get through this situation or to help this situation and come out alive and to come out more knowledgeable and more experienced? Obviously, my ideas aren't popular opinion, I would say. And a few people have reached out to me and they've surprisingly appreciated my perspective and insight on a few things. But I would definitely say that I am naturally introverted. Life circumstances forced me to be extroverted at some point. And for me, the idea of life is just so deep, and I'm still trying to learn it. I'm still trying to understand it, especially now when I'm faced with a lot of things happening. I mean, I definitely don't want to make selfish decisions, but I want to make the best decision possible at my current state. I am nowhere near perfect. Life is not all perfect. But I think that's where we as humans thrive. When we're challenged with something. When we're facing a big problem, what we would label as a problem, we have to be bigger than that. It forces you to be bigger. It forces you to be resolute. It forces you to stand strong. It's very difficult what I'm talking about right now, and that's what I take pride in. I have a lot of difficult conversations with clients, with family, with my students, and I hope that these difficult conversations actually do get out there. And I'm not perfect. I don't understand life completely. I'm one of those people that are doing their best. Even me recording and talking like this is kind of foreign to me. I'm usually in front of a group of people, or at least with someone I'm close with, when we kind of dive into these conversations. It's a very delicate thing because, it's the difficult conversations. It's the rough topics that generally people disagree with, and that's fine. And for me, this is just my perspective, and I don't know shit, to be honest with you. I think I do sometimes, and then other times I realize I don't know shit, and that's fine. And that's just how life is. We ride waves really high. We sink beneath the ocean sometimes, and that's okay. I think it's in our nature as human beings to withstand and persevere. I think that's in our nature. And life is life experiencing itself. I posted something a while back, maybe a week or two ago, that living is the experience and balance of life and death. We're born and we die. Those are two things that we all will accomplish by this life. And everything in between life and death, or being born and dying, is the experience. And, whatever you believe in, whoever you believe in, I think we're all brought to this earth with this spark of life, where life, and we're talking the entire universe and the world, is experiencing itself through the lives of every living being on this earth. And that's humans, that's plants, that's animals. Life is experiencing itself. And if we don't take a snapshot and kind of take a step back and look at these types of things, I think we're missing out on life. Now, things happen. I mentioned earlier, like, things derail us. I would say don't resist. Don't force either. And allow life to happen. I believe that's what we're called to do. I believe we're called to experience life and not label it. In reality, suffering is inevitable for all of us. There are no exceptions to suffering. There are no exceptions to the opportunity to sacrifice, the opportunity to sacrifice yourself for others. And what's your sacrifice? What's your suffering? That, to me, is the beauty of life, that we have the opportunity to sacrifice ourselves for the greater, bigger picture, for a greater life. No one is immune to pain. We are all human. Nothing is perfect. And sometimes life is the way it is, and sometimes it's shitty, and that's okay. We just have to let it be and let the emotions be what they are. We can be an observer of them, step back from the emotions a little bit, and assess yourselves again. And remember that your emotions aren't you. I think that was the biggest thing that I had to remind myself in this past week. A lot of my listeners kind of know me, they know my family, and I guess I'm trying to figure out the best way to navigate this situation, not just for me, but for my whole family. And we are not perfect individually and as a family. We are battered people. We are broken people too. And in moments like this, you don't want to be 100% allowing a break. We're not broken to the point of not being able to serve God, to serve his people. I think we have to pick up the pieces, or at least examine the break, to examine the current situation, and figure out who we are and what we are and why this is happening to us, and why, in a sense of not challenging or confronting God or life, I think why, in a sense of what purpose does this serve us? What purpose does this serve the world? And, I don't know what's going to happen after this. I'm recording this, on this day, but tomorrow could be different. And I don't know. I may not even post this. I don't know exactly what's going to happen with this, but a lot of things are playing in my head right now, and I really appreciate this type of outlet where I don't know who's listening to this, to be honest with you. I know some of you have reached out and you've said that you've listened and you really appreciate it. I really appreciate that. But in reality, I don't know who listens and who I'm kind of reaching out to, or who's responding to this. I would love to hear from you guys if you guys do. If you have any insight or even a disagreement with me, that's fine. I'm actually open to that. I'm welcome to that. You can message me, email me, thoughts and ideas. And that's something I hope to have, open discussions about these types of things. If you do know what's happening in my family's situation, things are a little challenging. They have been challenging for a while, and it's one of those moments where it's coming to the brink of challenges. And not to say that there's like I'm on the edge or anything. No, even more so, I'll run to the problem. Even more so, we're standing resolute. We're continuing resolutely on our path. We at this point, I think what we were taught was to hope, to pray, to ask for guidance in times like this. But ultimately, at the end of the day, at the end of a prayer, it's God's will be done. For all things that we ask for, may God's will be done. And that's the story of our lives. It's allowing life to unfold and understanding that it was never really our lives to keep. This is basically just a chapter in our lives. For anybody that has reached out or spoken to any of our family, I definitely want to say we appreciate it. We hope for the best. We pray for the best things to happen. But we do, of course, have to prepare for hard times. I don't know what's going to happen from here on out. I know that whatever does happen, we have enough to handle it. Whatever happens in your life, you have enough to handle it. The fact that you are in this place of questioning, of searching, seeking, that means that you're still alive. So I think we're going to find it. And day to day, it's a battle. It's ups and downs. And in challenging times, I think people should unite, support each other. And that's what we're called to do in this life, is to withstand and persevere and learn. I think at this point, everyone is hoping for the best. And I know it's super repetitive of me, but hope and expect the best, but prepare for the worst, unfortunately. I mean, in this case in particular, I'm still figuring out what God wants me to understand. I'm still figuring out how best I could serve my family, raise my family, and take responsibility and ownership of who I am and the things that I've done, the things I decided to do. So I don't believe bad things happen to good people. Shit happens to all people, no exceptions.